Oh, hello. My name's Trish Dent, and I live in the UK in Suffolk. Today I'm going to be doing a bit about fermenting and fermenting foods with you. Specifically, I'm going to give you a demonstration of making my version of something somewhere between sauerkraut and kimchi, and I call it Suffolk kimchi. But you could also call it sauerkraut with attitude. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to make natto, which uses a very different process. So I was very interested to hear the previous speaker, Alex, talking about koji and so on. So it's all an area that I'm particularly interested in and enjoy playing with and developing. So before I get started into the demonstration, I was just going to say a little bit, because I did say I'd be giving you the latest news and information about what's going on with the importance of gut and microbes and the microbiome in our health. So the old adage of you are what you eat has not changed, by the way. It's even, we're even more I'm even more interested anyway, at least to know that, in fact, I've got a book that's interestingly called 10% Human. So what's the rest of the 90% of it? The rest of the 90% of the cells in our body are microorganisms. We're not hardly human at all. So they play a huge role in just about every aspect of our daily lives. And really how much they play and the big role that they have is only just being discovered. So we know that they aid digestion. They also produce enzymes. They produce quite a lot of hormones. For example, the feel-good hormone serotonin is produced mainly in the gut, and it is actually microorganisms that seem to be producing it. They also make neurotransmitters for us. Antioxidants support the immune system. So there's a hell of a lot going on right down here. A lot of recent research has been is now focusing on it, and it's the kind of big next thing in research. And we're beginning to prove what we in the macrobiotic community already know, that lots of vegetables and some fermented foods are what we need to eat, really. And those vegetables and fermented foods will be, some of those will be prebiotics, which feed our good bacteria, and some of them, such as sauerkraut, will be in the main probiotics, but they also have a prebiotic effect in feeding the existing good bacteria in our bodies as well. Sauerkraut, what's it got in it? It's got a diverse number of lactoacid producing bacteria, lots of different species, and they ferment sugars in the vegetables. The biggest diversity of vegetables in sauerkraut, as it's made traditionally, is roughly on day 9 of it being fermented. So one of the things that I recommend is that you ferment it for about 7 days, and then there's a small secondary fermentation that goes on, which can happen best in the fridge or a cooler environment than the kitchen. And that's when it subtly starts to develop. But I do leave my ferments in the fridge. Sometimes they disappear into the back of the fridge, and they might sort of only come to the fore about 6 months later. It's a bit of guesswork as to which ones are going to be fine, but basically the sauerkraut and the cabbages, so long as they've been stored in the right ways, will keep for a long time. So specifically in sauerkraut, it has been shown that it does produce those mammalian or animal neurotransmitters, of which gamma aminobutyric acid is one. Now, these neurotransmitters are important factors in a number of things, including sleep and anxiety. And I know in our modern society, we're hearing so much about people not getting good sleep and suffering from anxiety. So sauerkraut may not be the total answer, but it can help to give us a good foundation. Also, those the other things that can be found that the microorganisms in sauerkraut produce is serotonin, which, as I was saying, the feel-good factor, which is important in depression. So, with no further ado, I'm going to get on and make you some of the kimchi with the Suffolk kimchi. So this is one that I've made earlier. Hopefully you can see that it's got vegetables in it. So there's cabbage in there, there's radishes, carrots, there's the dark flecks, wakame seaweed. I've got onions and garlic and ginger. Traditionally, kimchi would be made with chili, but I find it doesn't need chili, and I don't put it in. Right, I'm going to show you the other things I've got here as well today. So this is cauliflower, and I've fermented cauliflower with horseradish here, and the horseradish. So the cauliflower is just cut into florets. I'm not going to show you how to make it. And the horseradish piece are just matchstick size pieces. And I've got here wonderful Brussels sprouts, good old English fare, and they're fermented with garlic. And they are incredibly tasty. So basically a Brussels sprout, I don't know, I know we're an international audience. I don't know if people know what Brussels sprouts are, but these are Brussels sprouts. They're kind of like miniature cabbages. And so they're absolutely brilliant for fermenting. The cabbage family are particularly good for fermenting because they have so many, I'm going to pick up one of them here. They have so many of the organisms that we want to ferment the food already on them. So when we're making something like a vegetable ferment, it's what's called a wild ferment, because we don't have to add any different bacteria or fungi or anything else. It's all present on the leaves of the plant, and some of it might be present in the air. So I've been fermenting for quite a few years, and I think my kitchen microbiota has changed as well, and my kitchen helps me with produce the best quality. Over time, it's kind of eased itself into, I don't know if it's because I've become more experienced, or because the kitchen environment's got better, but less and less mishaps and mistakes seem to be happening, and less bad bugs getting into the ferments. So what I'm using today, I would always stress using the freshest possible ingredients and organic where possible. And there's no point in going, oh, I've got this half cabbage left over in the bottom of the fridge. I'll start to make sauerkraut with it, particularly if it's a few weeks old. Let's not go there. So what I've got here is it's not a Chinese cabbage. Traditionally, kimchi would be made with Chinese cabbage, which is a much paler version. This is actually found commonly in Suffolk, and it's why I call it Suffolk kimchi. It's what's called a pointy or a hispy cabbage. If I open a few leaves out, you'll see that it's actually got a kind of point to it. Pointy cabbage, hispy cabbage, it does have another name, I can't remember the third name for it. I'm just going to cut it open. And then you can see, I don't know if Zoom's and the quality of my internet connection are going to let you see that, but it's a beautiful little pyramidal shape. I do cut the tough stalky bit out of it. You can always use that elsewhere to make a stock or something like that. So that's basically the vegetables. We don't want to be having, the reason that I don't use any other vegetables is clear, as someone was saying before, we don't want pesticides in our food, least of all in something like this. I will wash these often there's mud on them. A bit of mud never did us any harm. In fact, the soil is full of its own microbiota, which can be really good for us too. But yeah, how important is it for children to play in soil and mud? It's very important. But I do take, you don't want to end up with grit in your teeth, so I do take some of it. I wash some of it off. So here's some that I prepared earlier. I'm not going to give you a demonstration of me chopping badly. So this is actually about 3/4 of a cabbage. I'm not going to prescribe exactly how much because everyone's cabbages are different sizes. You could be using ordinary white cabbage. I've got a red cabbage here. You could use red cabbage. The thing about the cabbage is cutting it finely is quite a good idea. And what I love about the Hispy cabbage is that it's got a certain softness and it's slightly lighter and less dense than white cabbage. And it ends up with a really great, soft, subtle, easy going result. What I do from here, just going to give my hands a little wipe. What I do from here, so that's the cabbage part. And as Ginat said, the recipe will be on the her website. I'm going to put a teaspoon, start with a teaspoon, and I'm measuring it properly. Usually I don't. A teaspoon of salt. So that might end up being roughly 1% salt. And I'm going to give it a massage. So here you go. It's like I'm listening to the other people today. I was just thinking how important it is. And I think Alexander touched on it, was actually about how we view our food and what we do. And for me, the secret ingredient is a bit of love. And so maybe this little massage of the cabbage imparts a little bit of love to my cabbage now and the end product. But whatever way you want to do it, just sending good thoughts into your food works wonders. I'm just going to get some of that off. You probably won't be able to see it from Zoom, but I'm going to give you a chance anyway. It's glistening slightly because liquid has come out of the cabbage, and that's what we want to encourage. So we're actually starting the process of the breakdown of the cabbage. And what's going to happen is those microorganisms take advantage of that breakdown in the cabbage, and they go for it and get into their growing spurt. I'll get into that in a minute. So today I've already cut up radishes and carrots, so I'm going to add those in. I'll just pop those on one side. I'm going to get my hands in there, give them a good mix. I do this bit by bit. I'm a bit more wary about getting my fingers into the garlic and the ginger. And it might be partly because I wear contact lenses. And if any of you wear contact lenses or ever had, the combination of ginger and contact lenses is not a happy one. Okay, so in this other bowl, I've already finely chopped an onion, and I've got in there grated ginger and crushed garlic. So I'm going to add that in. Quantities are a bit variable in terms of, it's like whatever you feel like. So the other thing I like to add is a bit of wakame. So there you go, a bit of wakame seaweed. And I'm going to take a large spoon and give it a good old stir up at this point. One of the things that happens during the fermentation is those flavors, the flavors, ginger, you might think, oh, raw ginger, raw garlic, that's going to be very strong. But those flavors start to blend into the rest of the food after, and they sort of temper a bit with the fermentation. Somehow the fermentation process really tempers them. Okay, so I'm going to call it a day at that point. There's something I forgot to tell you, and that is Here's one I did earlier. This is a really important point. So I take an outside leaf from my cabbage and I create, it's got a midrib here in the middle. I create this circle that's just a bit bigger than my jar that I'm going to use. This is a 500 milliliter jar, and I've created this circle that's just a little bigger because it's going to have a function after everything's gone in the jar. So with no further ado, I'm going to pop this in the jar. So hopefully that's reasonably well mixed up. I have been known to miss, I think one lot of ferment. I forgot to put the wakame in, and I couldn't be bothered to take it out the jar again. So I just put some in the top, and I thought, oh, well, I'll mix that in properly when it's fermented. And I had some friends round for dinner, and they just launched into the top of the pot with all the wakame in the top. They absolutely thought it was wonderful. Okay, sorry, a bit of noise going on now at this point. Because what we want to do is push this down. So quite often people don't massage their sauerkraut. They might just put it in a jar and get something to ram it down and press it down. And if we press down for long enough and hard enough, we may find, and if our vegetables are fresh enough, we may find that juice starts to come out of them and we don't need to add much by way of juice. I'm going to call it a day at this point. So it's quite important here. What I'm going to do is I haven't totally filled it up. You can see it's like, oh, she's left a bit of a gap here. It's really important that you don't overfill it. Do not be tempted to go, well, I've just got a couple of spoonfuls in here. I'll bung them in. You need a good space, and I suggest 3 to 4 centimeters between the top of the vegetables and the top of the jar. So I'm just working around to press it down with the back of the spoon and get all the little pieces of, which is a bit of a chore. Treat it as a meditation, and it's no longer a chore. Get them down so that they are not going to contaminate. This is an anaerobic process. I'm going to put one more spoonful in. It's an anaerobic process, as I was saying, so it's without air, and that's really important. We don't want air getting in touch with our vegetables. I'm going to put this on one side. So I have got some left over, great in a salad, or you could put it in a stir fry. As I said, don't be tempted to overfill your jar. So this is where the round leaf comes in. I'm just going to push it in. And hopefully, yep, there we go. We have liftoff. The midrib will get lodged underneath the shoulder if your jar's got a shoulder. It's really great. I love these jars. I buy them online. And it's got a bit of a shoulder here. What else have we got? This may have been a sauerkraut jar, and sometimes we find that that's got a bit of a shoulder as well. So that's great. What I'm going to put on top of there is what I call a glass pebble. I hope you can see that. I'm just going to hold it up. And it's a piece of glass specially designed as a weight to hold everything down. You don't have to have one. What I've got in here instead is a piece of carrot, and that just holds everything down underneath the water. It's kind of wedged between the lid and the base. So I'm going to add water to this. As I said, it's an anaerobic process. Not enough liquid has come out of the vegetables. I've already added a teaspoon of salt in here. Normal process for sauerkraut production is about 2% salt. So as I've, which is 2 teaspoons in half a litre, which is the water I've got here. So I'm going to put 1 teaspoon in half a litre. So the salt is there for a reason. The salt actually helps to control which bacteria develop and which don't. You probably know, basic science, salt is a basic antibiotic. It stops things growing. But some microorganisms absolutely adore salt, and they thrive in the salty environment. So I'm adding water. I'm just going to, can you see that? I hope you can. Let me know if you can't. I'm adding water, not right to the top. I'm taking it just above the surface of the vegetables and the leaf. And then we're going to put the lid on. So I've got a few bit of vegetables in the way. Now, I'm not going to put the lid hard on. Here's a really good reason. These microorganisms are going to start producing carbon dioxide. When they produce carbon dioxide, that takes up more space. And a number of things may happen. That carbon dioxide takes up more space than the water in there. And so it will expand. If I put this on really tightly, danger of explosion. So just don't go there. Put the lid on by all means, but leave it loose. So I leave it just maybe partly turned or completely loose like that. I also put my ferments either on a small tray or a plate. And sometimes what happens, the gas might get under some of the vegetables and push everything up. And you may find these vegetables are actually lighter than water. They want to float. So we have to kind of resist them floating. And sometimes they may come up. So if that happens, you can simply press it all down. So you might notice it's like I was quite relaxed about my hands. They are clean. I don't use anything antimicrobial in my kitchen, although I do clean and I use soap. Soap is a natural antiviral and antimicrobial. It breaks down the cell walls of those microorganisms, and so is a good cleaner. Nothing like good old-fashioned soap. The other thing that's really important, which a lot of people don't think of, is a label. So I label what it is, what I've put in it. I label the date that I've made it. It's really handy, and you might think, oh, well, I'll remember that. But by the time I've done 3 different ferments, I may have started to forget exactly what day it was that I started. For the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts, I find that about 2 to 3 days is actually all that they need. But the best thing is for you to try out and see. With the Suffolk kimchee, or the sauerkraut with attitude, as I call it, it needs to be fermented, and that will be at room temperature, which might be traditionally sauerkraut would have been made in a cellar, for example, and the temperature would probably have ranged from 13 to 18 degrees. Commercially made, they take it up to 19 degrees. Depends how warm your kitchen is, but you may not want to go more than 21 degrees. When you start to get hotter than 21 degrees, other organisms can start to creep in and take advantage. And that's the reason not to. So if your kitchen gets very hot, you may do better to put it in a slightly cooler place. But don't forget it. Do check it every day and make sure that you haven't got an explosion of things and water coming out the top. Sometimes, especially if you've got nice fresh vegetables, things can get a bit lively. So what else did I need to tell you? I haven't even got a checklist here. My checklist is, will I make it? After about, with the Suffolk kimchee, after about 6 or 7 days, I will put it in the fridge. It will carry on fermenting in the fridge at a very low rate. You could put it into any cold store would be fine. There will be a very slow process of fermentation going on. A lot of people go, well, where's the acid that where's the vinegar, where's the acid? And it's actually, so what these microorganisms do is they produce their own acid. As they ferment, one of the byproducts is lactic acid, and that's why they're called lactic acid producing bacteria. And it creates acidity in the water that they're in. And so that combination of that acidity as time goes on does change the organisms that are in your sauerkraut or your kimchi. As time goes on, some will not flourish so much because the acid level has got too high, and others will come in and take their place. And as I said, most diversity is found to be at about day 9 of a ferment. So once I've got to day 7, I'm happy it goes in the fridge. One thing that you can do if you're new to it is have a little taste, get a fork and have a little taste of the ferment every day, and then pack it all back down and actually stop at the point at which you're happy. Some people might only want to ferment it for 3 or 4 days. Other people might prefer to leave it for a couple of weeks, for example. Okay, so the other thing that I'm going to demonstrate is natto. But before I get on and do that, I'm going to pause for breath. And have you got any questions about this or vegetables? There is one other thing before you launch in. The other thing that I did want to mention was that the liquid in itself is really important. It's like, don't throw it away. It's very similar, but with more flavor than umisu seasoning, the liquid seasoning, the red umisu seasoning, comme ça, which actually is the acid byproduct of umeboshi plums. So what we've got here is a really nice acid environment, which is full of bacteria in the liquid as well. And so you can put it on, you can put it as a dressing on vegetables, you could put it in salad dressings, and you can also use it to ferment root vegetables. So root vegetables such as carrots, I've got a daikon here, which I might have put in there, but I didn't today. Carrots and beetroot, and beetroot is fantastic fermented. They require a bit of a starter, and I also make beetroot kvass, which is a lovely liquid, which is a great blood tonic, and it requires some of the liquid out of here as a starter to get the fermentation going. This introduces the bacteria, the good bacteria, into the environment to get those ferments going. Okay, I'll stop gabbling and let you ask any questions before we move on to natto.
Someone is asking, when do you tighten the lid?
Very good question. I tighten the lid at the point at which I put it in the fridge. So at that point, the fermentation will be so slow that it's not going to cause any upset unless your fridge breaks down. So that's when I tighten it up. Yeah. So there will be, I mean, that's a very interesting question, because there's stuff coming out and there will be a small amount of things possibly going in. And you see commercially a lot of fermentation pots with all these lovely little things to stop air going in, like you find on wine flagons and things like that. But actually, I haven't found that you need it. Really don't need it. The most useful thing, other than the vegetables and the jar, that I found is this little weight, which you can buy online as well. They're great.
A piece of carrot is not much of a weight.
No, it's not. But I've wedged, which one is it in? Here it is. I wedge it underneath. So I just slightly tighten that, and it acts as, just stops it coming up. So it's not actually, it doesn't act as a weight. It acts as against the lid to stop it moving up.
So will all 4 of these jars become ready at the same time? And how much can you eat? Do you have fermented food?
Yes. How much can you eat? So I would say I made these yesterday. So I would probably put those 2, the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts, I'll put those in the fridge tomorrow or the day after. This one I also made yesterday, and I'm going to leave that another 5 or 6 days. And the one I've made today, I'll leave 7 days. How much do I eat? How much should anyone eat? It's a very common question. I'm looking for my tablespoon. Tablespoon is here. So this is in England, this is a tablespoon. It's a serving spoon, basically, not a spoon that you'd eat dinner with. So I'd allow 2 or 3 nice big tablespoons heaped per person per day. People may want to have more or less than that. I would not be tempted to have too much more. It can be incredibly moreish and a bit addictive. And the people that have to be careful about having fermented foods are individuals with high histamine levels, and that they may actually exhibit a lot of allergies because they have high histamine. And so these fermented vegetables may not be appropriate for them until they've worked through high histamine and allergies.
So would you have it at breakfast?
I wouldn't personally, but you could do. There's no reason to not have it at breakfast.
Okay.
I might be more inclined to have it at lunch and dinner. It depends what you eat for breakfast, really.
Okay, a few more questions. Awesome talk, Trish. Thank you. Have you ever made...
Okay, it's my mistake. Sour Reuben. I had it at Kripalu.
Sour Reuben.
Just looked it up. Yeah, sour Reuben. Little turnips. They're good.
Oh, little turnips. I do actually. Where did they go? I had some turnips. They didn't end up in my basket. Turnips in this country little ones are about that size and big ones are about that size, but the little ones are younger and fresher, I guess. And I do make a ferment with turnips. I use turnips and radishes because they're very similar. They're very similar animals. They've got that pungency, slight pungency to them. And so when I add these radishes, they create a pinkness to the whole ferment. And I'd maybe do just a small jar, maybe half that size. And they are fabulous. Better to add some of the liquid from one of these ferments to give it that little extra start as a ferment. And I find it only takes 2 or 3 days to do. Have you made it?
No.
And I would slice the vegetables up as well. Yeah.
If you ever get to Kripalu, they make them. They have recipes online, but your things are beautiful. Very nice.
Oh, thank you.
Someone's asking, pickled beets. Is there anything special that you do?
Yes, so I often do have pickled beetroot, and today I haven't got any with me. So when I ferment beetroots, I add some of this as a starter. So if I did something about this size with beetroot, I'd chop the beetroot, put it to about here. I'd maybe add some spices or something like that. Some orange rind. Orange rind is great to ferment, and maybe some ginger. And I would put a couple of tablespoons of the liquid from a fermented sauerkraut in with it to get the beetroot started. And again, something on the top. So again, a cabbage leaf on the top is good, or a piece of cabbage leaf to hold the beetroot down, because again, it wants to float. Yeah. And when I'm making beetroot kvass, so kvass, you drink the liquid. It's made in a very similar way. I make it in a jar, and after about 4 or 5 days, it varies depending on temperature of the kitchen and various other aspects. You end up with a lovely, slightly fizzy drink, which is deep and beetroot flavored and absolutely wonderful. It's Ukrainian dish or drink, and they use it as a blood tonic in Ukraine, or they used to. I'm sure they still do.
And the idea of using cheesecloth rather than a lid.
Yeah, the stuff can get in through a cheesecloth, and cheesecloth is good. I've got some here. I'm going to be using cheesecloth in my next one. So cheesecloth or muslin, this is muslin actually. You could put it over the top and put an elastic band on it. But actually, this, if you look at it, microorganisms would get through, and possibly more than if you put a lid. If you've got a lid on, they've got to go around the lid and underneath and on the top. Whereas if you've got something on the top, they can just drop straight down. How much difference that makes to microorganisms, I don't know. Are they subject to gravity?
Can
So
you
what-
only buy the glass weight online?
So I don't know, depends what country you're in. In England, you can buy them in Lakeland, which is a kitchen shop, big kitchen chain of shops in the UK. But abroad, I've got no idea. You'd have to go to a big kitchen shop or a shop where they do a lot of fermenting, but big kitchen shop is the best bet. Yeah. I think at this point in time, if I might just say, I need to move on and show you how I make the natto. Otherwise, and then we can, if people have got questions about this, we can always come back to it, if that's okay. So moving on, just going to clear my space a bit. Get a few things out the way. So natto, I'm just going to take a moment. Just going to pop that on. Just going to make sure my beans are at boiling. My beans, soya beans I cooked earlier. So let me tell you a bit about natto. Here we go. There is some natto. I'm just going to take a sacrilegious fork and show you a bit more about that. I don't know how much of that you can see. It's not very deep in the jar. This is how I make it, and I make it up to about this depth. And if you can see, it's got little mycelia that seem to be growing. And if we give it a stir and stir things up a bit, you can just see this. You might not be able to see this online, but there's a few filaments and there's a gooiness and a gloopiness to it, which is typical of natto. So what is natto? Natto is fermented soya beans, and it's fermented with a particular bacterium. I've got the spores of the bacterium I use here, and it's called Bacillus subtilis. And it's originally was first found on straw. So traditionally, it used to be made with straw, with the soya bean pressed into cakes and surrounded by straw. But these days, we've got good old top cultures. I use top cultures in the Netherlands to buy my Bacillus subtilis spores. Are they in the Netherlands? They might be in Belgium. I might be saying something a bit sacrilegious there. I might have got the wrong country. Anyway, they're on the continent, and we have now left the EU, but I can still buy it, I'm pleased to say. And these are my organic soya beans, which I soak first. So why bother to make our own natto? I live fairly rurally and not close to a big city, and I found that's one of the reasons I make the ferments myself. And I found that I can't get natto, and I don't really trust that someone sends something like that in the post. So I thought, why don't I try making it myself? So here I am. It's always worked really well. I've always done well. It's not the first thing that I've fermented, and I've been fermenting for a number of years before I got the nerve together to do something where they say so this is a wild ferment. Natto here is not a wild ferment. It's a very specific ferment using the Bacillus subtilis. And so we don't want other organisms to get into our product while it's fermenting. And so that's the most important thing. that we have to bear in mind, that we want to incubate it, but we don't want to incubate the wrong bacteria. So why do we bother to do it? Less phytates, more digestible. So they are soybeans rich in calcium. By the time natto is made, it's got some B vitamins in it. It's got vitamin C. I'm sorry, reading from the list: potassium, zinc, selenium, copper, and iron, all important in immune function. And it has vitamins K1 and K2 as well. Vitamin K2 activates bone building processes, so they help to get the calcium into your bones. It's been shown to slow age-related bone loss, and it may help prevent calcium depositing in arteries, simply because it's probably going into the bones where it should be instead. It's also good for heart health, fiber, and an enzyme it produces called nattokinase, which dissolves blood clots. Immune system, strengthens the immune system and contributes to healthy gut flora. And they have shown, so I'm reading from this because it's a little experiment, probably a big experiment that they did using Bacillus subtilis as a supplement rather than natto. And they found that 55% of people who on the trial were less likely to have respiratory infections over a 4-month period when they were taking it as a supplement. So it also has blood thinning qualities. And so it's also a rich source of PQQ, which is also found in a lot of other vegetables. This improves energy. I'm not going to give you the full name, it's a long one. It helps with memory, attention and learning, and it increases blood flow into the cerebral cortex, which might be why it helps with the learning and the attention span. So has a positive effect as an antioxidant, reducing heart inflammation after COVID vaccines or COVID-19. Let's not go any further into that. My beans are boiling. So I'm just going to bring my beans over here. So my beans have soaked for nearly 24 hours. They've been rinsed. I've added kombu and pressure cooked them as I would with any other bean. And it's been in here for about 45 minutes pressure cooking. You need to actually sterilize what you're using. So I sterilize by popping in my oven at 100 degrees centigrade. I'm using centigrade, not Fahrenheit, I'm afraid. And these temperatures that I gave you for this were centigrade as well, not Fahrenheit. Don't do Fahrenheit anymore. My jars as well will be sterilized. So I will have sterilized these in an oven beforehand. So I'm going to get some of these beans out. The recipe says 200 grams. So I did do 200 grams of beans here. And there's a few left slurping around in the juice at the bottom. So what they go in, this is a sterilized jar as well, and the lids are sterilized. They're going to go into that. Before they go into that, I need to add the spores. So I add, it's about 1 gram spores. I haven't got a measuring thing for a gram. So I kind of went two of those, and this is a salt spoon. 2 of those little salt spoons would be about 1 gram. So you can, and it works. It's what works. So that goes in. I'm going to take another spoon and give it a good mix up. Some people like to do elaborate things and put liquid with it. And you might think those have just come off the boiling point. That's going to kill all of that bacteria. but these are the spores, and they actually need about 80 degrees centigrade in order to be activated. So just off the boiling and just slightly cooled is adequate. Now, what I get is I get a number of jars like this, and this is actually, this is where British miso comes in nice jars this size. And I want about three thicknesses of beans depth. So hopefully you can see that there. I've got 3 thicknesses of beans depth. That's all I'm going to do. And then my piece of muslin goes on the top with an elastic band. And then I'm going to incubate that at 35 to 40 degrees centigrade for 24 to 36 hours. I'm going to put that on one side. I do not have an incubator, but here's one I made earlier. So what I use is a cool box. Just going to take the bits out of it and I'll show you how I pack it. So a cool box is also a heat box if you put hot things in it. So standard cool box. I start with a bit of newspaper in the bottom, hot water bottle full of hot, pretty much boiling water, and more paper because that's going to be too hot for my poor beans and my poor bacteria. So this would be one of probably about 8. That will do 6 to 8 of these. I'm just going to put the lid on loosely, just in case something gets dropped on it from a great height. And so if I turn that up, you might see what's going on. But I can probably get 6 to 8 in there. That's what I do. And then I put more newspaper on the top, another hot water bottle. I pop the lid on and it goes in my understair cupboard, which is where our heat exchanger for our air source heating is. And it's nice and warm in there. After about 12 hours, I will change the hot water bottles and put fresh hot water in. And as I say, 24 to 36 hours is all that's required for it to come out like this. Once it's come out like this, my husband won't eat this, by the way. There's only 2 of us in the house. So lid on loosely, this freezes really well. I put the lid on loosely. A lot of people will not freeze glass. Lid on loosely, again, it comes off like that. I put the date on it, very important. And I put that in my freezer. Once it's frozen, tighten the lid up and it can stay there for up to 3 months. And then when it comes out, it's really nice for it to spend 24 hours in the fridge doing some kind of mysterious secondary ferment before it goes in the freezer. And I think that might not even be in the notes. Quite why, I don't know. I think I've told you everything you need to know about making natto, and it sounded very quick and very easy. And it is very quick and very easy. I think the holding point that most of us have about making it is that, can I do this? Can I manage to make it without it getting contaminated with anything else? And what happens if it goes wrong? Sometimes ferments do go wrong. If things come above the surface in the vegetable ferments, you may get some mold on the top. White mold is the most common one, and you might not want to eat it. If it's got pink in it, there's a saying, if it's got pink in it, bin it. However, red radishes, the color leaches out of the red radish into the liquid, and so it does go slightly pink. So learn how to tell the difference. And with natto, I've never had anything go wrong with it. Oh, shame on me, because we learn from our mistakes. And I haven't actually had a disaster yet with the natto. If it takes too long, if it's not hot enough and it takes too long to ferment, that's when things may start to go wrong, because it's opportunity for other organisms to get in. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point and see if you've got any more questions before we finish. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ginat, for the opportunity to show people, yay, and share my discoveries.
Well, I'll tell the way that I make natto, which is I have a big, where am I here? Like a flat pan or dish or something. And I'd put the cooked soybeans mixed with the bacteria and spread it through. And then I would put plastic wrap on top. And then I would poke holes in it. And then I could just balance it because of its size in the dryer. And I would put a light bulb in the dryer that would keep a constant heat. And I could see when it was starting to get stringy and ready. So that's the method that I've used.
That's very good. Yeah, a lot of people do use a lot of people do use ovens with light bulbs in them and things like that as well. I've seen quite a few of those online. The only thing I would say is the proximity. Does the plastic touch your beans and your ferment? Oh, well, that's good. That's excellent. So it's sort of a film that just goes over the top. Yeah, I've eradicated, I haven't eradicated plastic as plastic bags in my drawer, but I've eradicated plastic film from my kitchen and I use bee wrap instead. So this is just fabric covered in beeswax. And it does a great substitute, but yeah.
So we had a speaker today that said she's not vegan, she's vegan. Our second speaker today. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. My brother keeps bees, so yeah, as a kind of husbandry of wild animals. Really, it's that balance between, you know, being able to control nature and having no control over nature. You know, they'll swarm when they want to.
Hi, Trish. I want to know if I have only a refrigerator and no freezer, what can I do? Is there any chance to keep natto for how much time do you think?
The best thing to do is try it and see. I would not want to keep it more than between 3 and 5 days. Yeah, how long would you normally keep cooked beans in the fridge? Probably not for more than 3 days. I would imagine that things will start to deteriorate after that. Yeah.
I think then this is not a method for me to use.
No, unless you've got a neighbor, a friendly neighbor nearby,
Yeah.
And you could offer them some natto in exchange for use of their freezer.
Neighbors with a good curiosity in point of view new food.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and for those who aren't familiar with natto, it is a bit of an acquired taste, and a good mustard, this is Dijon mustard, French mustard, goes a long way to making it much more delectable.
Few more questions. Have you tried making natto with different kinds of beans?
Yes, I have. It's a very good question. I have. And I've tried making them with, I think it was haricot beans, partly because haricot beans are about the same size. They're a similar sort of color, slightly paler. And I just kind of went, oh, let's see how they go. And I was very disappointed with the result. They just kind of went flowery and dead. That said, I have read other people's experience. I think Sandor Katz, who's a great American fermenter and a bit of a guru, I think he said that he made it with other beans and it was okay. But I personally, it didn't. So soya beans are quite different from a lot of other beans. They're very high in protein. They have all the essential amino acids, unlike other beans. and they have more oil in them than other beans too. And I don't know what it is about the qualities specifically that made it seem so much better. I mean, maybe I should try it again and perhaps try it with chickpeas. But I'd be very interested if anyone else has tried it and what the result was.
Or maybe black soybeans or dookie beans.
Yeah. Yeah, dookie beans, good idea. Have you made it with anything else?
No.
No, I can't, well, I haven't been able to get black soya beans so far, but yeah.
What, hold on. Are the Brussels sprouts and cauliflower pickles made with salt water like the sauerkraut?
Yay. So they these two, the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts, are made in exactly the same way as this. I wouldn't call them pickles because in England, when we talk about pickling, we add vinegar. And because we've not actually added the vinegar, I know in macrobiotics, so we call them pickles, I know, and it gets a lot of people a bit confused. But the process of pickling, as I understand it traditionally in my culture, is that vinegar is used. But there's no vinegar used in these, it's just brine, and they produce their own vinegar as the lactic acid forming bacterias develop. And they will develop their own. They're all cruciferous vegetables, and they seem to be, the cruciferous vegetables seem to be particularly rich in these particular bacteria. Yeah.
Okay. Other comments. Soybeans are unique legumes in their own category, genetically, botanically. Someone else has made natto with black turtle beans, and they were not as sticky. Someone's asking, where do you purchase the natto starter?
Yeah, so the natto starter, as I mentioned, there's a company called Top Cultures, and Top Cultures, I think they are in, I think it's topcultures.com, and I think they're in Belgium probably, and I buy it from them. So this sachet, well, it was probably about twice of that, if you get an idea of the size. That cost me about 10 euros plus probably a couple of euros for it to be posted. So that's how much it is, which, you know, it does a lot. It might not look like a very big amount, but it does a lot of beans. So it's lasted a long time. Oh, and this is beyond its use by date, but it's still good.
All right. Well, then I join the final comment here. Oh my, this was a spectacular cooking class. Very inspiring. Thank you so much. So someone was also asking if the wakame was soaked, and I assume not, because you then poured water over it.
No, the wakame is not soaked. It just absorbs the flavors from the whole thing as it goes over time, and the week is enough time for it to really soften up. And it's a delicious way of eating wakame.
It's wakame flakes you used?
I guess they are. It's the end of the packet. They're a bit more flaky than the rest of it. Normally I'd buy it in strands like this, but since COVID, sources of supplies of things like that have changed, and so we've got more European and less Far Eastern, so slightly different. Yeah.
Well then.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. You make everything so easy. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Anyway, good to meet you all.